Mic off.
Welcome to day 2 of the One Tam Virtual Summit on Climate Change and Resilience. What a way with that Gary Yost video to welcome in the special climate of the Mount Tam region. I'm Mia Monroe, a National Park Ranger and the Marin Community Liaison for the National Park Service, a member of the One Tam Steering Committee. In case this is your first time joining us, One Tam is a partnership mobilizing the resources of the National Park Service, the California State Park System, Marin Municipal Water District, Marin County Parks, and the Golden Gate National Parks Conservancy to ensure a vibrant future for Mount Tamalpais. In case this is your first time joining us, let's go over a few things. The One Tam Summit is a biannual program that brings together One Tam partner staff, scientists, community members, students, and supporters from Marin and beyond to talk about the health of the Mount Tam region. This year, our theme is climate, change, and resilience, and we're exploring a range of topics, including climate change impacts in Marin County, the work of One Tam and others to address them, intersections with community health and equity, the 2020 fire season that is deeply affecting the Bay Area, and more. Last week, we opened the summit by centering community and equity in our discussion of climate change. And we talked about impacts of climate change specific to Marin. How many of you joined us on October 1st? Let's do a quick poll. Well, do we have a good sense of how many are returning and how many are new? Looks like we have almost 70% returning and 90%. Janet, want to interpret those results for us?
Sure, Mia. It looks like well over half of the folks who are here coming back for the second time. So I just really appreciate how much. To me, that says that folks really valued the content that we offered up last time, and I hope that this time we do the same. We have a great group of panelists lined up, so thanks for joining us.
Janet, thank you for that word. And we have a great group of panelists, but we also have an amazing tech team. Would you mind all coming on and introducing yourself? It takes a lot of people to put this symposium together, and the summit is a real credit to you all. Thank you.
So hi, I'm Janet Klein, and I'm here for the second day as well, and I'll be handling the Q&A today. So thank you, Mia, for being the hostess for the overall show, and now I'll pass it to Michaela.
Hi all, I'm Marit with the Parks Conservancy, and I'm supporting attendees. So if you're having any issues, I can drop my email in the chat.
Can you all hear me now?
Yep.
Great. Okay. I'm Ecological. I'm with the Parks Conservancy. Thank you for being here. And I'm going to be behind the scenes running the Zoom. So I will you now to Mia and Janet. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, take it away, Mia.
Well, part of this summit is all of you. So would you please take a moment to share what you hope to get out of today? Please put it in the chat, and Janet and the team will provide a summary so that we can get a sense of who you are out there and what you hope for.
So I'm seeing a lot of things in the chat that I know are going to be addressed today. Questions about what's happening on Mount Tamalpais itself, what's the update with the work that's been going on Marin Municipal Water District land around carbon sequestration. There are some questions that are a little bit outside of what we're going to address today. Questions about elk, questions about Point Reyes National Seashore, and that's going to be outside our purview for the entire symposium. People are also talking about they want information about how they can get involved, things they can do to help, inspiration. Mia, anything jump out at you?
Well, let's see. I see climate health advocate. I see resiliency. I see a lot of things that are very pertinent to today. So I'm glad everyone is tuning in. Okay. So I also would like to remind you that we have a few opportunities to get into discussion about the content from last week. Coming up on October 27th from 1 to 3 p.m., Environmental Allies, a conversation about equity and environmentalism, a space to discuss the connections between environmentalism and justice, with the hopes of creating a more inclusive, equitable, and sustainable culture within our organizations and those who visit our park. This is hosted by staff from the Parks Conservancy. There will be a second opportunity on October 29th, 1 to 3, Environmental Allies. That's a second opportunity. These links will be posted in the chat and may be made available, as will so many of the other resources that you'll be learning about today. So let's go to what's happening today. Today we are going to focus our lens on forests, what's happening in our forests and parks, science that helps us make stewardship decisions, and this year's fire season that has so deeply affected the Bay Area, our parks and landscapes and communities across the state. We'll also feel the forest today. We'll talk about why it's so important for all people to have access to these places, and even how we might design better interpretive material to enhance the connection. Today, we will not cover emergency preparedness, evacuations, or things you can do to protect your home. The Marin County Fire Department and Fire Safe Marin have many excellent resources available. You can find links to them under the Additional Resources tab on the Summit webpage for today. If you live in Marin County, I highly recommend you watch State Senator Mike McGuire's town hall on climate and fire preparedness. We'll drop the link in the chat. A couple of logistical notes before we get started. We'll have a few minutes for questions after each presentation. You can type your questions in the Q&A box that you'll see at the bottom of your Zoom screen at any time during the presentation. We'll try to get as many questions in as we can. If you lose your connection today, simply click back on the link you used to join, or you can also listen by phone. Take a look at the email you received earlier this week for that information. We'll have a break about halfway through today's session for about 15 minutes. We'll also be recording this session and we'll make it available and other sessions available within the month. And now I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker today is Patrick Gonzalez. He'll be giving us an overview of climate change in forests and woodlands. Patrick is the National Park Service's principal climate change scientist and adjunct professor at the University of California, Berkeley. As a forest ecologist, he conducts applied research to detect impacts of climate change analyze vulnerabilities of ecosystems and people, and quantify ecosystem carbon. He also works with national park staff to integrate climate change science into resource management and carbon solutions. Welcome, Patrick.
Thank you very much. Can you see my screen and hear me? Just give some indication.
Yes, we can, Patrick. Thank you very much. Looks great.
On an autumn day 34 years ago, I arrived in California, and the coast redwood trees were one of the first sights that I saw. I was in Redwood National Park looking up at the tallest living beings on Earth. And these trees also make Mount Tamalpais an ecologically and culturally important place. But since then, human-caused climate change has increased global temperatures and temperatures in the Mount Tamalpais area at greater than the global rate. And published scientific research has shown that human-caused climate change is altering forests and woodlands globally and in California. On the other hand, forests can help naturally reduce climate change. So I'm going to today, briefly in 20 minutes, cover these topics in these 4 sections. And forests actually appear on both sides of the budget equation, but the main driver of human-caused climate change is carbon pollution from cars, power plants, which pump 10 billion tons of carbon into the atmosphere every year. Deforestation, mainly in the tropics, adds another 1.5 billion tons. But natural ecosystems can only naturally absorb about 6 billion tons. So 5 billion tons every year goes up into the atmosphere, and it's this fundamental imbalance that causes climate change. Consequently, the emissions have intensified the greenhouse effect to the extent that the additional energy of human-caused climate change is equivalent to burning one 100-watt light bulb over every square meter of the Earth continuously, day and night, every day of the year, across all of the Earth. Consequently, the increased heat has altered ecosystems and human well-being. Colleagues and I published published an analysis of the historical and projected climate change trends across the 50 United States with detailed analyses for the first time for every single US national park. And we revealed that anthropogenic climate change has exposed the national parks to disproportionate increase in heat and aridity. And you can see that the national parks have increased here 1 degree per century, and the United States, the 50 states and territories have been half of that. Zooming in on the Mount Tamalpais area, we can actually see that, that here in the North Bay is an area of particularly higher increases in temperature. And for the area of Muir Woods National Monument as a whole, average annual temperature has increased at 1.4 degrees per century since 1895. This map, it shows the results for precipitation, with the darkest blues increase in precipitation of 50% per century, and the darkest browns a decrease of 50% per century. And the national parks have experienced a disproportionate increase in aridity. And zooming in on the San Francisco Bay Area, we can actually see that the area of Mount Tamalpais is in an area of reduced precipitation, even though most of the globe, 4/5 of the world, is experiencing increases in precipitation. Here, aridity is increasing. The rate in Muir Wood, the total annual precipitation has decreased, but the rate is not statistically significant. So scientifically, we can only say that no change has occurred. So I'm going to show you now a series of examples that have gone through the scientific procedures of detection and attribution, robustly tying the impacts to human-caused climate change. Here in Bandelier National Monument and across the southwestern US, anthropogenic climate change has caused a drought since 2000 that has been the most severe since the 1500s. And in this case, in Bandelier, causing die-off of one-seed junipers and pinyon pines. Human-caused climate change is intensifying the heat that drives wildfires, the main factor that drives wildfires, and has lengthened the fire season in the Western United States by up to a month. This is translated into an increase in burned area. And in fact, climate change has doubled the area burned by wildfire across the Western US above natural levels. Of course, wildfire is a necessary and natural process in many forest and woodland ecosystems, but climate change has, in the Western US, including California, has doubled it over those natural levels. The combination of the aridity of climate change and the accumulation, the unnatural accumulation of fuel from outdated policies of complete fire suppression have increased burned area 9-fold across the Western US since 1984. And a result of this has been arid conditions that are increasingly unsuitable for natural regeneration, and research has found that the aridity in the soil and in the air has crossed thresholds for regeneration of ponderosa pine and Douglas fir in the Southwest. In Rocky Mountain National Park and across the Western US, climate change has doubled tree mortality from drought, wildfire, and here with these lodgepoles, bark beetle infestations. And we can see increases in mortality in the interior west and northwest, and most severely in California. Climate change has shifted subalpine forest in Yosemite National Park upslope into subalpine meadows in an area that has experienced an increase in temperature greater than the global rate. This is just one case among many in which human-caused climate change has shifted vegetation towards the poles or towards the equator or upslope. And biome shifts, the major vegetation formations of the world. These shifts have occurred at the biome level in boreal, temperate, and tropical ecosystems. That was all about the past changes. And now I'm going to show you some of the published research results for future risks if we don't reduce our pollution from greenhouse gas emissions. And the analysis for Muir Woods shows these projections of climate change. The horizontal axis is the projected temperature change through 2100, and the vertical axis is the projected precipitation change. And so 0, 0, that black dot, That's the historical baseline. Each of the small dots is one of 121 different projections from general circulation models, divided into 4 emissions scenarios. And emission scenarios are storylines of the future, by which the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, on which I sit, standardizes these projections of the future. And we see increases in Muir Woods of up to 4 degrees Celsius, that's about 8 degrees Fahrenheit. More than 2/3 of the models project increases in precipitation, but the combination of increased temperature and just a slight increase in precipitation can result in increased aridity. And that's what we see with this analysis here, actually an increase in the aridity in the San Francisco Bay Area projected under the highest emissions scenario. Actually, I did want to point out here that that red is the worst case, right? That's no action. But the good news is that sustainable actions and meeting the Paris Agreement goals can reduce the projected heating by 1/2 to 2/3. That's this green dot here. Each of the big dots is the average of all the little dots. Okay, increase in or continuing climate change increases the probability of a mega drought more severe than any in the past millennium. And continued climate change could also increase fire frequencies up to 5 times by mid-century. And this startling image from the campfire reminds us of the severe impacts of wildfire. In chaparral vegetation, the species are adapted to stand replacement fire, and they resprout. This is a resprout of Manzanita after the Springs fire, Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area. And you can see the stump in the middle from the fire and then the resprouts here. The danger is when drought comes in after the fire, you can convert the woodland to grassland or bare ground. And this risk of biome shift is a high risk for 1/5 of US national park land. Colleagues and I have analyzed this. The view from Mount Tamalpais shows the essential fog for the redwoods and other vegetation. And analyses show signs of a 20th century decrease, even if fog did not decrease at San Francisco International Airport or Oakland International Airport. It has decreased along much of the coast. Projections are mixed, however, on increases or decreases. So we need to engage in scenario planning to prepare for both possibilities of increased aridity or possible other change in the moisture balance. Of course, coast redwood trees depend on fog and depend on subsurface, depend on streams for water, and they experience drought stress severely when summer fog is low. And projection of this under low emission scenario actually finds that potentially the northern part of the range can survive under low emissions in refugia, but much of the southern part of the range where we are here, I'm in Berkeley, but where we are here around Mount Tam is very susceptible to to a loss of suitable conditions. Bishop pine also experiences drought stress. And the combination of the drought stress and bark beetles and the other mortality agents increases risk of tree mortality up to 50% across the southwestern US. So I see I have about 8 minutes, so I'm going to zoom through and hopefully have some time in the end. At Point Reyes National Seashore is now experiencing mortality from pine pitch canker fungus. And that experiences its highest growth around 25 degrees Celsius. So, so continued climate change increases the risk of this mortality in Point Reyes and any parts of Marin affected. Professor Ackley at UC Berkeley has projected the alteration of vegetation types in the San Francisco Bay Area. And for Golden Gate National Recreation Area as a whole, his projections indicate a potential shift, losses of grassland and redwood, and an expansion of chaparral vegetation. Now, climate change also favors invasive alien species, such as this invasive oat that we see in John Muir National Historical Site on this side of the bay, the East Bay. And because many invasive species in temperate zones have a higher CO2 efficiency utilization capacity, and the increased warmth and humidity is analogous to their home ranges, and also the disturbance of wildfire and biome shifts. Colleagues and I have analyzed this for the world, and zooming in on the parks, climate change and land cover change put 1/8 of the U.S. national park area at high risk of invasive species like this red brome in Joshua Tree National Park. I've been talking about forests and woodlands for the most part, but of course an important part of the vegetation are these, around Mount Tam, are these limited range, these small endemic forbs and flowers and herbs, and 3 rare and 1 endangered plant in Point Reyes National Seashore is at risk of increased mortality due to climate change. So I'm going to really zoom through here. Some potential options are conservation of refugia, as they're doing in Joshua Tree National Park, using published scientific information, guarding the refugia against wildfire and invasive species. Also, fundamentally, a policy shift from after the fact firefighting to proactive use of prescribed burning, like here in San Rafael, could reduce substantially catastrophic wildfire under climate change. I recently have issued a report on this. And of course, for ecosystems with that high frequency, low severity fire that should go along the ground, prescribed burning and managed wildland fire can reduce risks. And it's been done very successfully in the giant sequoia groves. The other type of fire regime that's very common around Mount Tam is the stand replacement, the high severity, low frequency fire in chaparral. And there, prescribed burning would increase risks of invasive species. So the adaptation measures are really limited to removing vegetation patchily. And Golden Gate and Point Reyes have been looking towards the future, and colleagues at UC Berkeley and I are working with park staff on a project to modify seed selection so that the park is propagating and restoring with plants that are more adapted to potential future conditions. So to conclude, it was a lot of bad news in the other parts of the presentation, but the good news is that forests provide a natural solution through carbon storage, and in fact, coast redwood attains the highest amount of carbon per square on the ground in the world. And colleagues and I have produced the only wall-to-wall estimate of this across the state of California. And the 27 national parks contain an amount of carbon equivalent to 1 year of emissions from 7 million people, everybody in Los Angeles, Boston, Miami, all those cities. So that's a lot, 7 million people. But actually it's not a lot because it's only 1 year of emissions. So in 1 year, those people can burn off all the carbon in the redwoods, the equivalent of all the carbon in the redwoods, the sequoias, and all of the other forests and vegetation. So this points to the need for, and in fact, wildfire has caused California ecosystems to become a net emitter rather than a net sequesterer of carbon. So this points to the essential need for fossil fuel emissions reductions. And even if the current administration at the federal level has denied science and blocked action on climate change, the 24 states and Puerto Rico of the US Climate Alliance have pledged to meet the Paris Agreement goals, and through renewable energy, energy efficiency, energy conservation have reduced emissions 16%, on track to meet the Paris Agreement. And of course, California is one of the leaders in this. We've actually reduced our emissions below 1990 levels. We've met our target 4 years early, and it will continue with continued action in California. And Golden Gate National Recreation Area has been a great model for this with renewable energy and other sustainable actions. And they actually went carbon neutral in 2018 after reducing their emissions 30%. So a lot of impacts and risks, but a lot of promise for solutions. And part of that promise is you taking action, both professionally, but also personally. And I encourage you to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. I live a car-free life, and with that and other actions, you can help reduce climate change and save our forests and woodlands for the future. Thank you.
Hi, Michaela, do we have time for any questions? How are we doing with the schedule right now?
Hi, let's do 1 or 2 questions.
Great.
Okay, I'm gonna start with a softball one. Someone noted that your pronunciation of the mountain, which we are all here to speak about, is a little bit, is not the standard Mount Tamalpais that you hear all the time. Can you speak to how you choose to pronounce it?
Oh, I apologize if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. Can you repeat how it's Tamalpais?
The most common pronunciation in Marin is Mount Tamalpais. So someone was just asking if there was something behind your pronunciation.
No.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, what criteria are applied to designating locations or areas as refugia?
Okay, refugia are places that are potentially more stable under projected climate change. And the methods depend on the analysis, but fundamentally they're areas where when you project either a shift in vegetation or a change in invasive species or a change in wildfire, they're areas because of the spatial variation of climate or of the particular characteristics of the site, the topography, or the vegetation there. It may be more sheltered or in some way more resilient to changes in climate change. So, some of the criterion, are either a lower exposure to the changes in climate, or inherent resilience and adaptive capacity of the location or the species there.
Great, thank you. And the last question would be, do you have a recommendation for best sources to learn more about climate appropriate restoration practices?
Restoration practices. So I've been covering the science and of course the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the US National Climate Assessment, and then a lot of the published literature that I've cited provides the best information on that. I would need to think and perhaps send you after the meeting today any specific sites on ecosystem restoration. It's really site specific and very very species specific. So I'll need to look to see if there's something more general about ecosystem restoration. Thanks
Great.
for your questions and for your interest.
Thanks, and I think we are out of time for questions. So thank you so much for your presentation, Patrick. I'm going to turn it over to Mia.
Thank you, Patrick, and I'm so glad that the presentation will be available. There's so much in it that's very, very important. Thank you for joining us.